It's a huge one for the Vancouver Canucks, home to the Columbus Blue Jackets after their fifth straight win. And joining us to talk about it is Matt Sekeres, one half of Sekeres and Price. It airs afternoons out of Vancouver, and it's been far too long since I've seen this gentleman's smiling face. How you doing, Matthew?
Very well, Rob. Of course, we normally see each other during Grey Cup week. I wasn't able to make it this year. You say it's a Canucks game night. I sure hope so. The late word here this morning is at least one player is tested positive, and there might be more after the Carolina Hurricanes were in here on Sunday. And as my understanding is, they had a bunch of positive tests and weren't able to take off at the prescribed time and fly out of Vancouver. So just sitting here waiting to find out whether it's more extensive than that with the Canucks and whether the game tonight is in fact going forward. It looks like that now, but we shall see.
Gosh, that team has been through enough going back to last year and now this. And then the firings. And our poll question today, by the way, is for Capital Automall Universal Collision Center, are the Vancouver Canucks, led by Bruce Boudreau, for real? And they've won 4 in a row, as I mentioned. What are you voting on that? And what's your assessment of the last couple of weeks out there?
Well, when Boudreau took over, we said, Rod, they're a 6-game winning streak away from being a 6-game winning streak away from being in playoff contention. So, there is a big high mountain to climb here for these Vancouver Canucks in terms of getting back into the Western Conference playoff race. Now, they've won 4 in a row under Coach Boudreau here. There's been a lot of good signs here, including Elias Pedersen waking up, and he had just a god-awful first 20 games of the season. They're getting that new coach bounce. They're playing with all sorts of fun and enthusiasm and joy, and it's been wonderful to watch after an opening 20 games that was really quite dreadful and really quite unwatchable here from the Canucks. So do I think they're for real in terms of, I think they're a fringe playoff team. I think they're a team that is a whole lot better than the one we saw through 20 games. Yeah, I believe that. I think they have more talent on this roster to sustain a better record than what they looked like through 20 games. But if you're asking me, are they for real in terms of, can they make noise in the Western Conference playoffs, even get to the Western Conference playoffs? My answer right now would be no, not yet.
What's the burning question for me, Matt, is you've been in Vancouver long enough now that you would have an idea of how the Canucks work under the Aquilinis. Like, did they wait? But I think they waited too long in Benning and Travis Green. I really do. What's your assessment of that regime, the 5 years, if you don't mind?
Well, I think they certainly waited too long if they wanted to salvage this season in terms of getting back to the Stanley Cup playoffs. They needed to make a move far quicker than they did to right the ship, steady the ship, and give themselves a fighting chance to compete for one of those final playoff spots. So I think they waited a little too long in that regard. I think you could also make a case they waited too long on Jim Benning. I mean, this was his 8th season, Rod. By year 8 of a building project, I sure hope you're closer to contender status than you are to the bottom of the lottery. And they were closer to the first overall pick on the day that Jim Benning was let go a week ago Sunday. He just was never able to construct a roster around some of the great stars he drafted, like Elias Pedersen, Quinn Hughes, and Thatcher Demko. So, yeah, I think ownership was very caught off guard by how poorly this team started. I think they felt like they had a team that was going to compete in the Pacific Division better than it did. And when the bottom fell out early, I think ownership was caught off guard and began a search for a new GM and a new head coach that took long enough to effectively scuttle this season because there were so many losses along the way.
Viewer in Kelowna asked who we thought of the 40 names apparently are on the list of Jim Rutherford for GM, who the front runners might be. What are you hearing out there?
Well, I mean, I think it's good practice to look at his most recent deputies, and that brings us to names like Jason Botterill and Jason Karmanos and Randy Sexton, some of the crew that he worked with in Pittsburgh. I wouldn't be surprised if any of the Penguins executives wind up rising here to the level of general manager. But the other thing he told us, Rod, was, he's got that list of 40 names, and some of them are guys who have been general managers in the past and could fill that role here. Some of them are young up-and-comers. And the one thing about Jim Rutherford over his tenure is, it's indisputable, is he has mentored a lot of guys who have gone on to become NHL general managers. Right now, Bill Guerin in Minnesota, Tom Fitzgerald in New Jersey, of course. Jason Botterill, once upon a time in Buffalo. So, I think the wise money is on that he is going to add someone who he can mentor. And then, of course, you have the looming factor of the Sedin twins, Henrik and Daniel, who are in this front office and also require some degree of mentoring coming on up if they're ultimately going to take over as decision makers for these Vancouver Canucks.
Wow, great report there. Matt, we got about 90 seconds left. I got to say this. Listening to you and Naylor host Grey Cup Saturday and Sunday was very special. But, as you mentioned, not part of it this year. What was your take of Grey Cup weekend and moving forward for the league?
Well, just how much I miss covering the Grey Cup. It's such a wonderful festival. I missed it for the first time in 8 years this year. I think the CFL has some work to do, Rod. I'm someone who is a forever will be a fan. But I do think this league has to take some big looks at its product and going forward. I'm not necessarily big on changing the number of downs or even the width of the field. I think that would be a big mistake. But, that idea that Ambrosi floated a number of years ago about starting the season a little bit earlier and finishing the season a little bit earlier, so you're clear of the start of the NHL season in October. You're maybe doing your Grey Cup in Thanksgiving when the NHL season is getting going, or maybe you're taking bigger advantage of the spring months. That's something that I think is beginning to resonate more and more with me. And I love those snow globe games, those cold weather games with the breath coming out the face mask and everything that we know and love about playoff football and Regina, Winnipeg, and Calgary and the Grey Cup. But if you're telling me that getting this league away from the NFL and the NHL competition will help viewership and help butts and seats, then I'm for that.
Love it, sir. Hey, where can people watch your show every day?
SekeresandPrice.com. They can listen. Of course, we're available wherever you get your podcasts as well.
All right, Matt. Happy holidays, my friend. Thanks for the time.
Happy holidays to you, Rod. Great to see you again. All the best to your team.
Matt Sekeres from Sekeres and Price out of Vancouver.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching the RP Show on YouTube. And don't forget, we're live daily on YouTube from noon to 2 Eastern. If you like what you see, hit subscribe. And if you like the program, check around for other segments of The Rod Pedersen Show here on YouTube.